Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talking Timepieces, where we talk about watch collecting and horology. Sorry, I missed a couple of weeks. Easter was pretty easy to guess because it was, I was doing things for Easter. Um, but last week I was in Montreal for an editor's event, and so I just didn't have the bandwidth. I was hoping to be able to do it from the airport while I was waiting and talk about travel watches, but I couldn't get a decent connection through the Wi-Fi there. So unfortunately, this is the first episode in a couple of weeks, but here I am back in the chair, and really glad that I have the opportunity to share this time with you because, well, you're the reason I'm here. The audience is what we crave, and if we didn't have you, I would just be some guy sitting alone in my room talking about watches. Now, speaking of watches, wristwatch check. I'm wearing my Snoopy, and as you can see, I went ahead and I went to the Frankfurt Omega boutique, and I picked up the latest. It's only got a one-click micro adjust, which is funny, but it's kind of like an over-engineered version of the Rolex one. Um, but at least there is some micro adjustment in the new band. But I went ahead and I got the new metal Speedmaster strap for the Snoopy. I'm quite pleased with it. In fact, I was with Chris, who is in the conversation. It was a fun time in Frankfurt, my friend. Let's see. Warren, hey, how's it going, Warren? And of course, Chris. And Vince, I'm glad that you're part of this show, my friend. Um, Gian, hey, Gian. Waited a few weeks. Oh, I'm glad that you came back again because sometimes when people don't see it, they give up on it. But I'm glad you didn't give up on me. Rick, hey, Rick, how's it going? And Damus? Damon Statos, I believe that is. Great to see you. So yeah, I'm really pleased with the Snoopy, and I got a recent purchase, which actually is related, even though it may not seem, to my watch collection. I got a smart ring. Didn't wear any others today, just so highlight the smart ring. Um, and the reason I say it's tied in is because every time I talk about my watches, somebody with a smartwatch would say about how it tracked this and tracked that and tracked the other thing. And now I can say, well, this does that, so I don't need a smartwatch. And then if they say, well, it's got a display of all of my stuff, I'll say, well, I'm already a slave enough to my phone. I don't need a more intimate connection. And now I've got the heart tracking and sleep tracking and other things that I find useful from wearing a smart device. So by having the ring, I can get away with wearing a watch and not feel guilty that I'm losing my steps or something like that. You know, because you'd be surprised how many people who own a collection of watches, nice watches, and started wearing their smartwatch for say work. Would just wear it all the time because they wanted to capture all their steps and make sure that their health regime is being properly tracked, and this will do it for you. And now you can wear whatever watch you want. Let's see. Gian, I've been too long to give up. That's cool. Tanya, hey, how's it going, my friend? So, the subject for today was the whole watch. Well, I shouldn't say watch. It's a luxury product issue. There's a big brouhaha currently in the industry and in the marketplace about luxury products because the Chinese have been telling everyone how much of these extremely expensive luxury products are made in China and how little are made in Italy, France, Germany, or Switzerland. And the handbag scandal is definitely a full-blown issue for the handbag industry. And I did see on a lot of them, they're claiming, yes, and we do Rolex and everything else. And I'm like, I could see them making parts, but let's talk a little bit about the whole aspect of outsourcing the manufacturing. There is a point where it is a problem, and, I personally think that the Swiss should have a higher percentage, but according to, Swiss law, for a watch to say Swiss made, it has to be at least 60% of the value of the watch, to be generated within Switzerland, and some people say, "Well, that's the labor and the parts are cheap and they come from China," and, it can be a big, aspect, and I'm like, "Well, if we're if we're buying the watch for the handicraft and they may be using, and I would say today it's cheaper to use a CNC machine in your basement than to ship watch parts in from China. I think that there are uh, companies using Chinese parts. I think there are probably some Chinese parts in almost everything, in almost every industry. But what you do with those parts is a different thing. And also, I've been to the Zinn facility. I've been to other watchmaking facilities, and they are making watches there. At the minimum, they're assembling watches there. Um, and those facilities exist and people have gone to them. And if you go to Rolex, they'll even show you where they're stamping out cases and they're doing the things that they need to do to manufacture. You can go to a lot of these places and physically inspect what they're doing in the case of the watch industry. Now, I have yet to see, the Italian and French luxury bag factories that are supposed to be in existence there. That would be the greatest counter argument that any of these bag manufacturers could have to Chinese. They could say, well, no, those are knockoffs and they never were ours. And here's our factory. And here's Luigi, who's been stitching bags together, for the last 50 years. A watch company can do that. Like I said, I've been to facilities and I've met the watchmakers and I've seen the tables and tables and the microscopes and the people working on these. And I've been to the places where they're putting the tegmentation treatment on the cases. And I've been to places where they're doing various precision machining and finishing on these pieces. And I would say at best, these watches are overpriced, but there is value in them. I don't think it's a case as egregious as the clothing or handbag industries because, well, number one, in the case of watches, um, there is a very high level of precision required to get to certain levels, and some aren't. I mean, like I just recently talked about the Seagull, which is based on the old Venus design from Switzerland, and that's a very nice piece. But that piece does not remotely, that Seagull doesn't come to the level of fit and finish that you would have in like this Mont Blanc Nicholas Rusek, which is a vertical clutch column wheel mono pusher GMT chronograph. Now, that's one of the reasons I like complicated watches because number one, they're not easy to fake. Matter of fact, the only complicated fakes I've ever seen use Swiss movements or Japanese movements or some other uh, mainstream manufacturers' movements. They're not making the fake movements aren't good enough to do um, GMT chronograph. Uh, it's not easy to do these things. Even the companies that have tourbillons, the Chinese tourbillons, they're not giving them away. You still have to pay. You're not paying, $50,000, or in the case of say Tag, one of the cheaper ones, $15,000. But you could drop $5,000 on a Chinese tourbillon now, and they won't be joking when they ask you for that money. And there are people who pay that money for the Chinese tourbillons. Certain levels of craft, you still need the craft. And so where those parts came from, then you start debating where, how much brand is involved and finishing is involved and all of those other issues, you know? Um, Sheehan saying hi to everybody. This is the topic I've been waiting for. TAP 1999, Dr. Bob's Nightmare, HRM. How's everybody doing? And I think this is a discussion to have. eBay guaranteed seems nice to have peace of mind. Well, that's to make sure that the watch you're buying isn't a fake and that it's a valid watch. But there are people who are saying, well, that valid watch is mostly made in China. And I I don't think that's the case with a lot of luxury watches. I think that's the case with a lot of mainstream fashion watches and some of the lower end. Well, I wouldn't call them luxury; I call them premium. Mainstream premium watches. There are a lot of Asian parts in, say, for example, a quartz Tissot PRX, but you could buy one of them for $500. Where the fingers are being pointed is at the high end of the watch range. And I don't believe those accusations hold as much water as the people who are making those accusations say they are. Because as I was saying, if you think about even if they got these pieces, somebody still and the perlage and the Cote de Genève and the detail and the finishing and the anglage and all of those things, uh, that takes time and effort as well. And so even if the raw stock may even have come from an Asian source, the end result is of a higher level. Now, you could make, um, for example, let's say, well, it's not hard to make a Rolex, and it's not hard to make a Rolex. It's not, but it is hard to make a Rolex escapement. You rarely see free sprung balances, and even some of the higher end fakes I found have little metal camouflage pieces screwed onto the plate to obscure the fact that the balance wheel is not an a free sprung balance. So even old Rolex has got some tricks up their sleeve, which is why if you ever are doubtful of a Rolex, open it up, have a watchmaker open it up and look at the balance. Now then they say, well, everything in the watch is made out of China except that. Well, go to go to the Rolex factory. They actually do have a factory, and they do. I mean, they can show you their invoices for the raw materials. I mean, if you don't believe, I mean, why would they buy raw materials and then just leave them in piles and buy Chinese parts or Japanese parts or Korean parts or other people's parts when, I mean, they're manufacturing. That's one of the things about a company like Rolex is they manufacture all of that stuff. You might as well say Seiko's made somewhere else. Well, actually, Seiko. The reason I mention them is they're completely vertically integrated. They even make their own quartz crystals. Through their electronic subsidiaries, that they own, and pretty much everything. But their watches are also priced accommodatingly. But when we think about, something really mainstream, right? You When you have critics of the industry, for example, who say, "Well, the PRX Chrono, it's just a Value 7750 in there. It's an off-the-shelf Swiss ETA movement." ETA or Chinese, make up your mind. Either it's a Chinese movement that they're putting in it, or it's an workhorse Swiss-made movement that is in this watch. You can't have both in the watch at the same time. There's no room, and that goes with. And unfortunately, someone could use that as a criticism. For example, there's lots of criticisms. This Cartier has got the exact. Well, I shouldn't say exact same. It's finished differently, but these both have 7753s in them, right? So when people criticize, well, that's got an off-the-shelf Swiss movement. Well, then it doesn't have an off-the-shelf Asian movement in it, right? If you the valid criticisms may sting, but then you got to stick with the valid criticisms and not go to the invalid criticisms and say, well, the parts come from China. Well, you just said that the parts came from Salida, because a lot of snobs turn their noses up at Salida and say, well, Salida is just a Swiss uh, patents run out knockoff movement company. Well, so if the watch has got a Salida in it, can't have a Chinese movement in it, can it? Either or, pick your criticism. Either the Swiss have movement mills, Etta and Salida and others. Either they have movement mills that are filling these watches, or uh, all of those movement mills are what, shell companies, and they're really importing Chinese movements. You got to pick your criticisms. Which is the proper criticism? Now, maybe you can say, well, the cases come from China or the bracelets. Now, that might be the case in some watches, but that's another reason why a lot of watchmakers go out of their way to make really good bracelets. To make it's more difficult to, and they're not even, and half of those companies aren't even thinking about fakes. They're thinking about homages, or they're thinking about the competition, and they want to make their product that much better than those competitive pieces. But it works in that direction as well. The IWC Saint Supri, right? It's a travel GMT. It's gotten off the shelf. It's slightly modified. IWC always does little things to whatever they get, but it's a 28, 24, I believe, or something along those lines. The GMT version of it. Um, the ability to have a good, well-made, highly functional piece, it's not easy. And so they may be using parts, but they're not critical. I mean, like I said, either there are movement mills in Switzerland or the yeah, then even the fakes are fakes. I mean, it doesn't work that way. Either the Swiss are, they're overusing Salitas and um, the like, or not. What are your thoughts on that? HRM. I really like how transparent Seiko is about their production of higher end pieces, the Grand Seiko and Crador. Well, again, Seiko makes everything in that watch. So even if the Grand Seiko were faking it, it would still be Seiko parts inside. And we all know they're not faking it. They have incredible levels of finish and polish and machining. Pardon me. So that's another thing about the smart ring. I'm drinking more water because I'm like, oh my goodness, I gotta watch my heart because now it's making me think about the dang thing all the time. But useful. So yeah, that's the other side of the coin. Because when you're looking at a bag or a piece, a dress, most of the original work went into the design of it. I mean, once you can run a sewing machine around the seam and use a pattern, right? But anglage, a hand polished bridge. Not everyone has a hand polished bridge, but a lot of the watches that are charging the prices that people are pointing at do have hand polished parts in there. Maybe they don't have all of them are hand polished, but quite a few are. And if you go to companies like the ones in Glashütte, you look at a company like I think Moritz Grossman is out of Glashütte. I know Nomos is, and Lange and Sona, right? And when you think about the movement, a Deutsche Uhrenwerk movement, right? This is not a lightweight movement. It's an in-house movement. There's a lot of work in there. So, yes, I think that there might be a concern, and one of the ways that the Swiss could address it is simply raise the percentage, say maybe 70 to 75% has to be Swiss value in the watch. And that would shut up a lot of people because then it would be even harder to bring in low cost parts to modify, that you would have to modify to make the watch. But the fact is that in the case of complicated watches, you still have to make the vertical clutch and the rattrapant double chronograph mechanism, and the GMT and the moon phase. Well, GMT and moon phase aren't that difficult, but if you have rattrapant chrono, rattrapant chrono, rattrapant GMT moon phase calendar in the same case, this isn't a rattrapant, but it is a chrono moon phase calendar. It's the value, very famous movement, the value 7751, right? Workhorse movement. So you say, well, it's just using an off-the-shelf Swiss movement again, but it's obviously not a Chinese movement. And there are good Chinese watches out there. I've reviewed a few myself, and the fact that they can make inexpensive tourbillons that are getting better and better and better every day. And Sega Design a couple of years back for their Blue Planet watch, they won the Swiss Horological Society's award. So even when it comes to Chinese watches, quality is in the ideas, the expression, the workmanship, the craft in the design that is developed, and at the higher ends in watchmaking, a lot of these companies go out of their way to show their craft because they're not doing it to, like I said, they're not doing it to dodge fakes or counterfeits. I mean, it helps, but they're doing it because they want to one up their competition. I mean, when you think about this piece, for example, right, with the rotating Earth, and once you hit, in conjunction with the stopwatch, here it comes. There comes the little spacecraft, right? So you've got this Speedmaster with Earth and moon phase and a little spacecraft with Snoopy inside. Yeah, it might have Chinese parts in it, but it also has a hell of a lot of, craft in it, you know? It's a well-made piece with very interesting complications, and it's not easy to fake or to do cheaply. And, this watch actually retails at a reasonable amount for a watch of its caliber. Um, there are companies who do overprice. Like, I think Rolexes are overpriced. I think they still have value, and because you can sell them even right now, Rolex prices I've been looking are still pretty firm because I don't think that luxury watches are as touched by this because most people know that, yeah, there is some use of parts in the industry, but for the most part, the companies that are making high-end watches are doing what they say they're doing with them, you know? What are your thoughts on that? A lot of people just saying hi to each other, which is nice. Let's see. Tap 1999. You might be right, HRM. Clasp could be Swiss, but who knows? They only say about outsourcing bracelets, didn't mention any countries. Well, if they're outsourcing bracelets, then you gotta be like, yeah, that's not cool in one sense, but it's a bracelet. The bracelet's not the watch. I mean, as many of you know, I'm a big swap your straps guy anyway, you know? The fact that they might be charging you a lot of money for that bracelet. So, like this $800 bracelet on this, if you know, if it came from China, I'd be a little, disappointed. But it's a nice bracelet. At least they made it to spec, and does fit the. But it's still a nice bracelet, and it still works with the watch. So I think it's a let the buyer beware kind of thing. And I think if there is some pressure from the marketplace for the watch industry to be more open and transparent, I believe they'll do that, because it's in their interest, especially at companies at the higher end who are doing all of that work. I think that's why the new land dwellers got a display back. They pretty much, in one sense, thrown the gauntlet down. They're like, "Yeah, go ahead and fake this. We have a escapement that is brand new in the industry, right? The land dwellers got their new escapement. Um, I strongly doubt anybody's going to be able to fake it. You probably could fake it if you could steal the, shadow masks from the, silicon foundry that they're making, the escapement parts from, but then you'd still have to make sure that they were to spec and fit the watch and were assembled properly and all of those other things that are involved in making a watch. And in the case of Rolex, by putting on a transparent back, the only fakes you're gonna see of that watch are the highest level, and they'll probably be Frankensteins because whenever I see a video that's about a super clone that beats all the others, it usually has gray market sourced parts. They're using Rolex parts in those pieces, so they're Frankenstein's. They're not fakes because basically you're being forced to use the parts from the company you're trying to copy. So I, Rolex isn't buying Chinese movements. They're buying Chinese parts to make fake Rolexes. They're buying Rolexes to reverse engineer to make fake Rolexes, but Rolex isn't buying anything. I mean, that's one of the nice things about Rolex. They're in that sense is that they boast so much about what they do and they show people what they do. They can say, look, here's a factory. Can those bag makers in Italy point to a building in Genoa and say, look, here's our factory. It employs 500 people. Rolex can do that. Actually, more than 500 people in the case of Rolex or Omega or even Tissot, who is more of a mainstream manufacturer and probably has a relatively high percentage of Chinese parts in their watches. Um, but again, you're paying also for the assembly work, the craftsmanship and finishing and the like. And maybe then you feel it's a little bit more, it costs more than it should. But then you start bumping into the monsters of marketing and brand value because there are people who are still buying those fancy bags, even though a lot of them know that they're not real. But then also that increases the acceptance of fraud because if nobody thinks that the product is made by the people who say it is, then the fake's okay. Whereas in the case of watches, uh, the fakes aren't made by the companies that make the watches, or else they wouldn't have to go through so many machinations to make people think that they're good watches. because I have quite a few fake watch videos on the channel, and for the most part, the watches are not the best. And when I get one that used to be a super clone, they age badly. They're not made that well. So a super clone that looks perfect after 5, 10 years looks like crap. It's beaten up, you know. And people say, "Well, there are better ones out there." Those aren't the ones I'm seeing. The most of the watches out there that are crap, and that goes for homages too. That's why some homage companies have good reputations, like Steinhardt, and some others I can off the top of my head. I don't can't think of any others off the top of my head, but Steinhardt is one that makes great homages. But then they're really running off of their own brand name, at least when it comes to the expectation of quality. So I can see that could be a problem with the Swiss watch industry, but the easiest way for them to deal with it is become A, more transparent, and I would strongly suggest B, raise the required percentage of parts in Swiss watches in order for them to get the appellation Swiss made. Because 60% is at least more than half of the watch, but it's just more than half. 75% of the watch being Swiss to get Swiss made would go a long way towards assuaging the fevers of the marketplace. What are your thoughts? Gian, I love Salida. Exactly. You can't say, well, it's got a Salida in it, from Switzerland, and say, well, it's got a movement from China, because that you can't have two movements in the same watch. Well, you can, but it would be normally then a chrono uh, with a moon phase or some kind of module on it, um, something like that. Tap, surprisingly, IWC bracelets are Swiss made. Moser and IWC have the same supplier. Well, I could easily believe IWC bracelets are Swiss made because IWC is a real belt and suspenders tool watch, high end Swiss watch company. IWC pieces. I love my Saint Supri. I really, really do love my Saint Supri. And this has a micro adjust. It's got a hidden button in the buckle. Aha. I kill that. Hope I can get that fly next time. Um, it's got a micro adjust in the buckle that is as good, if not better, than quite a few out there in the industry. It's just a really IWC makes a great watch, and they do the clean face so well. These are painted indices, but they look applied because they're so well done. It's just you know, and I think that's what separates the men from the boys, as it were. Um, the At the end of the day, it's the work that went into the watch that is the largest determinator of quality, in my opinion. However, like I said, I can understand how people could be disappointed if the parts came from somewhere else. But at the higher end, very few are outsourcing outside of, say, their region. Like, there are a lot of watchmakers in Switzerland that use other Swiss watchmakers' parts or movements. But that's a whole different issue from saying that they're from China. Like, if you look at the oyster quartz, right? That is a gorgeous it's an 11 jewel escapement being driven by a quartz regulated movement. I actually went and extra got the display back for this so I could enjoy looking at it, because I really do like the oyster quartz. I think it represents a horological point in Rolex's history and in the watch history as well, because there aren't many hybrid quartz mechanical movements in the industry. I would call spring drive a hybrid, but it's a much higher percentage of mechanical to electronic than the oyster quartz is. But the oyster quartz is a higher ratio of mechanical to electronic than other watches in the industry. I should have brought down the Accutron. But then again, a watch like that, you can't really accuse of being made from outsourced parts either. But then again, like I said, going back to the arguments, this has got a Value 7750 in it variation, right? This is a GMT variation on the Value 7750. And so people are like, well, all of these watches have 7750s in them. Well, they're not Chinese movements, are they? So even if you think about a Asian made watch like this Bulova lunar pilot, right? The meteorite didn't come from China. When you think about a piece. This piece only cost about, yeah, only, everything's relative, but about 1,500 bucks. We're not talking about something that's claiming to be economically expensive, but to a lot of people, this is a luxury product. To me, I think it's based on your rent. If it's more than a month's rent, then you're bordering on luxury. If it's 3 months' rent, it's definitely a luxury product to you, or to me. If it's 3 month, but I only pay 1,100. I deliberately keep my cost of living low so I can afford my hobby. But expensive is a relative term, and at the high end, the companies are taking the time, trouble, effort, and energy to show that there really are, in the case of watches, because the competition is insane. In the case of, a lot of fashion and, soft goods, leather goods and the like, it's a lot of branding and design, and you don't see them really touting the workmanship, unless you really get to some of the companies that are, and then it makes you wonder sometimes on some of the advertising on those products. Whereas, like I said, I've been to the Zen facility and I've seen, the room full of people hunched over tables assembling. And so, if those parts came from somewhere else, uh, they probably came from elsewhere in the world, of course, because, could have, but they could come from anywhere. And the Zen, when you talk about a mainstream Zen watch, they run around 3 to 5K at the higher end. So we're not talking about product that is comically expensive anyway. I mean, if I had a well put together waterproof chrono, it's going to cost 1,500 to $2,000 no matter what, if it's made to the level of fit and finish that is needed for the application that it's designed for. If it's made to that spec, then it's probably worth what I mean, that's one of the big things about unsung companies. A lot of people say, "Oh, yes, this is an underappreciated company." That's because they make good stuff, but their brand isn't that popular. Cue the Mont Blanc again. If this were made by one of the other mainstream, Swiss companies, it would cost twice as much for the functionality that's in it. Um, the brand is not as popular as others, so they're trying harder. So then the argument there would be, if you don't like some of the luxury brands and that they're overcharging, there are a lot in the watch industry. There are a lot of great boutique or micro brands or just smaller companies that make fantastic, phenomenal pieces, and they'll let you come to their facility and look at them make it, you know? So I think watches are a different realm when it comes to luxury goods in that sense, because watches still require such a high level of engineering to just put together, whereas a lot of the other products, that are charged as luxury products, they it's easier to hide their origin. I mean, if you cars are a good example of high-end luxury. That Ferrari might have gotten the lens covers, the lenses from an outside source, but that engine was made by them. Or if there are even parts in that engine that were made by other people, they put that engine together, dialed it in, tuned it, and manufactured that phenomenal car that went around it. It's at the high ends of mechanical engineering. It's, easier to be transparent because of the tremendous amount of physical effort required to do it, you know? Is Union Glashütte the same as Glashütte Original? No. Glashütte is the name of a town. M3 Chris 1. Hello, hello. Make one yourself. Well, there are quite a few, make a watch workshops in places like Glashütte and Geneva. I think it might even be a couple in the States. I mean, there are places where they'll let you assemble a watch yourself and you can learn about the watchmaking craft. And then the more you know, the better a buyer you are of the products, because you understand more about what the stuff does, and, makes you a better inspector of the watches that you're trying to buy. You can rely more on your own knowledge and less on others. So, but there are places where you can make your own watch. I mean, frankly, you could even go online and buy the parts to make a good watch. Just buy a good workhorse movement like a Unitas, and quite a lot of people do it. Watch Art Sai. He put one together using a unitas he bought online and a case that matched, and he built himself a watch. Uh, and that's one of the reasons Panerai got beat up. Uh, Not so much that they had Chinese movements, but they made watches relatively simply with off the shelf movements that made them easy to fake. And they got beaten up hard for that. And what did they do? They turned around and made more complicated pieces, which are harder to fake and to put down, frankly. And they were more transparent about how they got their watches and made their watches. And now Panerai is clawing its way back to respectability. Some would say they've gotten back, but and that was before any scandals from Chinese accusations. The watch industry, to a large extent, polices itself because of the craft involved. If I'm having a conversation with Bernhard Lederer over remontoirs, I doubt he bought those remontoire parts from China, or even if he did, they were from a very high-end factory in China. And to put dual remontoires into a watch and make it work properly with dual balance wheels and the gearing required and all of that that's a lot of the effort. Now, his watches do cost 70K. And maybe if he were more transparent about the cost, they'd be 35K, 40K. But to have 10 people even, forget about having hundreds of people, because a small watchmaker may only have 10, 20 watchmakers. But you're talking about 10 or 20 people who are pulling down six figures to do what they're doing. And that's not cheap. The labor involved in high-end watchmaking is a relevant cost center. Someone who hand balances that balance wheel, the free sprung balance, or someone who hand polishes the anglage on that bridge. That's where the real value is coming from. There are lots and lots of micro uh, single shop watch makers who buy off the shelf stuff, take them apart, completely refurbish, polish, skeletonize, anglage, and everything, coat Genève, and then sell them for 10 times as much. And in that case, the value didn't come at all. I shouldn't say at all, but the value wasn't based on the watch. The value was based on the craftsmanship that was put into that watch to make it that beautiful piece of workmanship that it is, that high level of fit and finish and polish and craft. That is a serious cost center, as it were. You can't just slap blank plates together. Actually, there are a lot of watches out there. If you look at their movements, they are just blank plates stamped together. But that's the difference between a $500 watch and you look at a Seiko 5. It's a great movement and great watch, and you can get it for $500. But then if you go and you buy a $5,000 watch, it's going to have at least some good finishing. It's going to definitely have good fit and finish in the case and the bracelet and the crystal, and it's the numbers are all going to line up. It's going to be a well-made piece. So then the argument becomes, are they overpricing for what they're doing? But they are putting value into that watch. But yeah, Union Glashütte and Glashütte Original Tap, to answer your original question, they're two companies in the same town. A very town, people jokingly call it the German Geneva. It's near Dresden. Pardon me. It's near Dresden, and there are actually over a dozen watch companies in Glashütte. In fact, like I was saying, Nomos is based in Glashütte, and their watches are awesome. Really do like the Neomatic 42. And so, or you look at something like a Frédéric Constant with its in-house movement, right? At what point is the cost of the parts versus the cost of the workmanship does it become an issue? I would say if they're overcharging you, I mean, this is the best world timer you can get for under, I would say even under 10K, and you can get it for under 5, 4, 9, and 9 and 9. But still, you can pay 5K and get yourself a fantastic piece with a tremendous amount of workmanship in it and fit and finish, and it's an in-house movement, pushing all those buttons. But Frederic Constant is an underappreciated, brand, but they have all of the quality in there that you expect to find in any of the higher end brands. So if you think that you're getting ripped off by XYZ high-end watch company, buy a Frederic Constant or buy the Tissot PRX with the Valjoux 7753 in it. You say, well, the PRX has got plastic parts, but that's the three-hander. The Chrono's got a off-the-shelf 7753 in it. So boom, Swiss. It's a Swiss-made movement in this. So yeah, I think it really does have a lot to do with what the company is claiming and how they present what they have. I mean, if you look at, say, for example, Zenith El Primero Chronomaster, right? How much of the value should you consider well, actually, let's see if we can get a better focus on that. Yeah, take it away and pull it back. It worked last time. There we go. So, at what point is the part where the value lies, and at what point is the craftsmanship or the finish of the part or the precision of the finishing or the assembly or the dialing in of the watch, all of that work? At what point does that add value to the watch? I think that's the real question to ask. And in some companies, they're going to fall short. Some companies, you're going to look at them and you go, no, 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 they're overcharging me. Then buy a product from one of the companies that isn't, that in your mind trying to. That's why I'm saying the more you educate yourself, the better a shopper you can be. You can decide for yourself if that's worth it to you, because you then have a better idea of how it's done, where they, get the parts for something like that. If it's possible to get the parts for something like that, there are questions you can ask, and the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. Like the more I know about watches, the more I realize I need to learn about watches. But then it gives you the information to make more qualified questions, ask better questions, and get better answers. Then you learn even more. But I would say, yeah, my big question is in the face of these accusations. Like I said, in the case of soft goods, it's a little bit different, where it's easier to hide that kind of shenanigans. But when you talk about a piece like this, not really. They're not hiding behind anything. In fact, you can see everything. You can see everything. So I think in the case of high-end watches, there's less of an issue, and there probably is some issue, obviously, but that's something we can address as well as a community. But the watch community has been pretty good about policing itself. There have been scandals that have come out, and they've been caught, and people have been, at the minimum, shunned. Some of them got fined or prisoned, I think. But the watch community is healthy. It's not as healthy as I'd like it to be, because I think there is a lot of snobs and posers in it, but even they have roles, and some of them are actually avid collectors. They just don't realize that they may be looking at aspects of a watch that maybe not are as important to the watch itself, like brand value. How important is brand value to a watch? That's a different conversation, but it pertains to this issue, because in the case of some of these companies that really are just taking Chinese products and slapping their labels on it, brand value is everything to them. So it shouldn't be everything to you. It shouldn't be everything to you. It should. That's why I like watches like the Frederic Constant, right? They're not pretending to be anybody but themselves, and they make some damn good watches. They make some damn good watches. So if you are worried about that issue, then I would say that gives you an incentive to shop around and find the manufacturers that aren't trying to pull wool over your eyes. HRM, Nomos said they won't be upping their prices in the US despite the tariffs. Well, that's because Nomos are cool people. And I guess that they recognize that they uh, would rather take the premium and maintain the market, because they're not that big or well-known a company. And I guess they've decided to, take it in the short run, and hope that it blows over. And then that way they don't lose market share or customers, you know, but I'm glad to hear that they're doing it. But then, be interesting to see how that all plays out. Maybe they'll pressure other companies, at least within their competitive range, to do the same. They will be even better value compared to the Swiss. That's true. That's a great point, HRM. If the Swiss watches go up in up in price and the Nomos stays at the same price, they'll gain more market share from people who will then finally look at Nomos. Because if you look at Nomos, you'll see that they're worth buying. And Yeah, so I think it's a smart move on their part, and they'll probably lose some money in the short run. But then again, they probably have a war chest for such issues. They a lot of German companies aren't as hand to mouth as American or other countries' companies who are looking at the quarter for everything as opposed to the year or 5 years for everything. Which is Rolex's big advantage being, who they are, that they don't even have to think about that stuff. And so having that long view helps a great deal. So I'm glad to see Nomos is doing an interesting move like that. I'm curious to see how it will impact their sales. Aditya Ravi, hey, how's it going? Hey, all, I've been wanting to get a book that covers the horological history of Germany. Do I have any suggestions? I would say any of the good books that talks about um, all watches in some cases, right? Like, for example, I have a couple back here, like this one, Armband Ohren. It's in 3 languages, and I bought it here in Germany. Actually, it was a gift from a friend here in Germany. Um, yeah, so I would recommend that book, Armband Ohren. It's in 3 languages. Or, well, A Man and His Watch is more stories. I would say any good horological history book will include Germany in it, but I don't know of any off the top of my head that are German-centric. Uh Tap, HRM to Tap, not the same company, but Union did use the automatic, geo movements in the '90s, just machine decorated instead of hand decorated. Well, see, and there'll be people who will try to who say, "Oh, it's machine decorated versus hand decorated." You still need somebody to steer the machine, or at the minimum, do the design, or at the minimum, take those finished parts and put them together into a watch. But yeah, well, that's one of the ways that, Frederic Constant can make the complications that they make at the price they make. They use a lot of machine finishing instead of hand finishing because that's where a lot of the costs are. So if the watch is hand finished, the raw parts could have come from anywhere, but the hand finishing is what makes the value in a watch of that caliber. Um, Broadly, there are two branches. Thanks for the info. There were one company before the fall of the wall. Yes, they were, all of the East German companies were one big company, Deutsche Uhrenwerk. That's why Glashütte and Nomos and all can, have such an interesting shared history because, they were all consolidated under the Russians and the Soviet Union, and then they were able to become their own companies again after the Cold War ended, which is richer for us because we got all of these beautiful companies out of Glashütte that it can now start making watches for the world again. Well, actually, they've been doing it now for 30 years, but, it takes a while to penetrate a marketplace, and some people are only just now getting, wind of how great, German watches from Glashütte are. Zinn is out of Frankfurt. They've been around since '61, as old as I am, and, they make nice pieces too, but Glashütte is more of the really, really high-end, German stuff, although there are some other really high-end German manufacturers in other places. I think Dornbluth, for example, is a great, manufacturer, and they're not based in Glashütte, um, and they make fantastic pieces, and a lot of their pieces are old traditional movements that they've reworked, like, a lot of Unitas and things of that nature, but they also make some of their own stuff as well. But again, just like with Dornbluth, or like I was saying with other companies, Dornbluth is one of those companies where the value is in the workmanship more than it is in the materials. Um, Tap, my confusion rose to Swatch ownership of Union. Uh, they also own Glashütte Original. Yeah, well, but those they are okay. They're owned by the same company, but they're independent divisions within that company. So you can't that you're both kind of right in that sense because they're no longer part of a shared conglomerate where they shared everything, tooling, people, and all that other. Uh, they're separate divisions in a larger holding company, Swatch. but they are independent divisions. They do their own thing. Aditya, broadly, there are two branches, right? One around Black Forest and one around Glashütte. Well, I was saying, I don't think Dornbluth is a Black Forest, but there are some good watchmakers in Black Forest. I think Dornbluth is up in the northern area of Germany, but I'd have to look it up. I could be wrong. Ernie Mack, Eric Mack, Eric Mack. We're running towards the top of the hour, but there's still some time to ask some questions if you want. Sheehan, what do I think about Swatch Group being mostly Chinese made? I own a Longines Hydro Conquest, and I can tell myself this doesn't feel the crown winding like a Tudor at all. Well, it's not a Tudor. Longines, they're in deep with the Swatch Group. It's an ETA movement inside of that Longines. In fact, if they depending on what model you get, their master collection, the ETA makes a column wheel 7750, 7751, which nobody else in Swatch Group gets. But Longines has got a really long history of their own. Don't forget, Tudor is part of the Rolex Group, and they really, really, really want that flawless experience, whereas the Hydro Conquest is on the more of a mainstream piece, and so they're more concerned about that it's waterproof and that it's made well and it has a good fit and finish. The Tudor's a more expensive piece, and so you would expect it to feel different. I mean, that Hydro Conquest is what, 3K, and the Tudor is 5 to 6K. The Hydro Conquest, if it's a three-hander, it might be even less. Yeah, I think it's around between 3 and 4, I think, the Hydro Conquest. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that Tudor is 30% more expensive, depending on the model, 40%, 100% more expensive, depending on the model. So the Tudor, you would expect it to have better fit and finish, and that comes a lot of that comes from the workmanship and the assembly. Someone polished it and made sure that it fit, or it didn't. The watchmaker's assembling and it doesn't fit. Then they do some stuff, polish it or change something. That's another reason you have a watchmaker doing the assembly, because if you just had somebody who just is good at assemble it, there could be a problem and they won't catch it. And then the watch breaks down on the road. You need a watchmaker because it's like the old Mercedes. Mercedes used to have two teams making a car. They had the regular factory workers making the assembly line cars, and then they had a team, I think it was up almost a quarter of the assembly force, wearing white coats, and these were really good automotive engineers, and they would tweak every single individual Mercedes that left the lot, left the factory. And that process almost killed them when the Japanese came out with Lexus and Acura, because they were able to make luxury cars without all of that extra fiddling around, and Mercedes had to change the way they made cars. But watches, to a great extent, are still made in that fashion. They get the base parts or base materials, and then they tweak each individual piece, and depending on how high end the watch is, they tweak the whole thing, or they just tweak what they need to make sure that it works. But someone who knows what they're doing is assembling that piece and can address problems in that movement as they're assembling it, because that's their job. So it's the workmanship in the watch that is a significant part of the value of that piece. Because some people are saying, well, the Chinese parts are cheap, and the Swiss are saying, well, the 60% is coming from the labor. I'm cool with that. I mean, like I said, it costs money to have a room full of good watchmakers working. These people are expecting, salaries, and if they're good watchmakers, they're going to get good salaries. And if it's a high end brand, they're going to have good watchmakers, and that's going to cost money. And you can make all kinds of arguments, but yeah, at that point. But the long story short, Gian, yeah, the Tudor should feel better than the Longines, because it's, number one, it's pitched. Even in the marketing alone, it's pitched as a higher level product, and it's priced as a higher level product. So theoretically, it should feel like a higher level product, and it does. Longines used to make minute repeater in the 40s and 50s. I hate Swatch hierarchy. Well, I think The Swatch saved the watch industry during the quartz wars because it allowed them to consolidate a lot of the wasteful part, the middle management and upper management in a lot of these watch companies. They got rid of them and they consolidated upper and middle management into the Swatch group, and they left the managers of the divisions to run their companies. And so I think it's good that these companies were able to rescue themselves. But I think now that the watch market is bigger, I would love to see some of these companies spin back out. I would love to see Longines become their own company again. I really would. In fact, uh, maybe but then again, there's also a good opportunity to resurrect some of the watch companies that were killed off during the quartz wars, like Nevada Grunchen, who's back. So but I think Longines doing a great job in the lane they are in the Swatch Group. I mean, I really do. I used to have the Master Collection, but this is a more practical daily wear. I really do like this moon phase calendar, uh, chrono. I really do like it. And, you could buy one of these used for 3K, give or take. So, at that point, I am comfortable with the watch regardless of where the parts came from because, well, like I said, again, if it's an ETA, you can't say it's Chinese. You can say, "Well, Longines is using ETA movements." Okay, fine, but they're not using, knockoff fake movements from some other place. They are comfortable in their role at Swatch. I wish they were an independent company, but at least they do have. I would say they have a healthy amount of autonomy for being within a company like that because they have come out with some interesting new designs in the last few years. You know, and if they were completely under the thumb screw of, Swatch, they wouldn't be able to do those kinds of things. So, I mean, yes, I would like to see Longines as a separate entity, but at least I'm happy that they're able to make nice watches that I can buy. Um, Rolex has their own gold factory. Well, they have their own, they don't make the gold, but yeah, I know what you mean. They have their own gold refinery. They have their own gold works, as it were. They also have their own jewelers, which is why if you have diamonds put in a Rolex, it'll reduce its value because if Rolex doesn't do the diamond work, nobody will take it seriously. If, for example, if you had like a used president, a pre-owned president, gold president, date, and one had an aftermarket diamond bezel and the other had the original factory gold bezel. In resale, they would be roughly worth the same because the buyers would discount the diamond bezel because Rolex didn't do it. But yeah, Rolex that's the thing about that's what I was saying earlier. If you really are worried, there are companies who go out of their way to show how they do everything. And you could say a lot of negative things about Rolex, but they make flawless pieces and they can show you where they got everything. And I don't know if you were around earlier from when I was talking about it, but the new Land Dweller, they put a display back on it for a reason. Well, the Land Dweller also shows that integrated bracelets have peaked. If Rolex is issuing an integrated bracelet, then yeah, it's peaked. But they also put a display back on it. And I think they did that for two reasons. Number one, high-end mechanical watches now are expected to have display backs to show that they're mechanical. And two, it's way, way, way easier to fake a sub with a closed back than it is to fake a watch with an open back because then you have to make sure that the movement matches the original. And when it comes to something like a free sprung balance, or in the case like I was pointing out, the Land Dweller has a brand new escapement design. Try to fake that. And then now it's a display back, so anybody with a loop can look in and say that this isn't Rolex's new escapement, which is a very distinctive design. It's actually quite pretty with the two star-shaped pieces and all, the two escapement wheels. I think it's a really cool escapement design, and it's gonna be really hard to fake. You're not gonna see very many fake Land Dwellers out there, and the only ones that are they're gonna probably have to have stolen parts, gray market parts in them or, some kind of camouflage, the way I've seen on some of the higher end pieces, but you're it's gonna be really hard to see a fake Land Dweller because if you have the skill to make that escapement, make your own watches, Same thing with even a basic free sprung. That's why most fake Rolexes don't have free sprung balances because it's not easy to do. And if you can make your own free sprung balance, make your own watch. You make some money. Uh, yes, I said that tap. On Butters, I refined gold for a living. Oh, the irony. Well, hey, Butters is golden colored too. That's a cute nickname. Gian, speaking of homages, Decla makes some decent pieces too. Are good Flieger homages. I even ordered one. They're German brand, but they make their own watch cases and components and are using Solita movements. Exactly. So, if you're worried about it, there are companies who are very transparent, like Decla, like a couple of others, on what they're doing. Zin, you know, Hanhart. There are a lot of companies who are very open about how they make their watches. Buy them. You know, that's a nice thing about the watch industry. It is it's driven by engineering, not by fashion. So I mean, at the end of the day, it's got to go tick tock. That's why a lot of people just stay in the courts. I mean, I don't mind the courts. It has to be distinctive, like the oyster courts, right? I love this piece. And talk about land dweller. I have a land dweller. Well, I mean, if you 36. And my lunar pilot is a quartz, but meteorite dial, and it's the high beat 262 k movement. Yeah, I'm cool with that for quartz and my G Shock, of course. But everybody should have a G Shock. Oh, elusive man, hey, nice to see you. Gian, also, is Victorinox pure Swiss? I kept seeing their ads, and they're always so proud of their Swiss made. They even wear the flag on the brand. Well, to be able to say Swiss made, they have to be at least 60% manufactured. And in the case of the Victorinox, right? I'll think of the Inox because that's one I have reviewed. They make one with mechanical. I think it's a Solita in it. So, the case is a really humongous chunk of steel. And I would think that maybe if they could get the case from someplace else, they still would have to assemble, finish, test the piece, and to have Swiss made on it, 60% of the value has to be from Switzerland. So, yeah, I would in the modern description of it, I would say definitely Swiss. And as far as Swiss watches, I would say they're very Victorinox. The Inox is a great piece. I gave one to my daughter. She loves it. The big one, and she loves it. And that watch is indestructible. I call it the Swiss G-Shock. Uh, but yeah, they're the real deal. Elusive man went to Bukhara. Let's see where. Oh, I scrolled too far. Okay, there we go. Um, I went to Bukhara Watch Week here in New York. Interesting people. Would have been sweet to see you guys there. If I had that kind of money to flip back and forth, I would. Arthur Morgan. Hey, hey. Datejust or Aquaterra? Which would I prefer? I would prefer the Datejust because it's more classic looking. But if I could wiggle within the Aquaterra lines, I would get an Aquaterra World Timer over the Datejust. The Aquaterra World Timer is a beautiful piece. And it's the one exception to under 10K watches under 10K that are World Timers. That's the one I would say is better than the Frederic Constant is the Aquatimer World Timer because it's really a GMT that's also it's a travel GMT that's also a World Timer, and the Aquaterra World Timer I would take that over a Datejust. And the funny thing is, it's still cheaper than the Datejust. The Datejust I think retails for 10 and change, and the Aquaterra retails for like 9 and change, or something like that. Or they might even be roughly the same price. So I would take the Aquaterra World Timer over the Rolex Datejust. But the Datejust is a really nice piece. I owned one. I sold my Datejust so I could buy my sub. But I would definitely get the Datejust back if I could, had the budget for both. Who knows? I'll save up. Maybe I'll do it again. But now that I have the Snoopy, I've got a casual daily wear because this retails for roughly what the Datejust retails for if you can find one. It took me 3 years to find one of these at a decent price, and I'm really happy I did. But yeah, if it were the straight up and down Aquaterra, actually it's really a nice piece. But if I could get either one without any worries of cost, because the Aquaterra is cheaper. So if it were a budget issue, I would get the Aquaterra over the Datejust because the Aquaterra is a great piece, as good as the Datejust and maybe better in a few ways inside the movement. Well, the new ones are gonna probably eventually have their new escapement, but the Aquaterra's got the, Daniels the, coaxial escapement in it. So, straight up and down, Aquaterra over the Datejust. If money were no object, Datejust over the Aquaterra. If I could play with the, rules a little bit, Aquaterra World Timer over Datejust. I hope that answered your question. Uh, Elusive Man, for me, Aquaterra. Good choice. Arthur, the Glashütte brand on a watch is Germany's version of Swiss made, right? No, no, no. Glashütte is a specific town in Germany. So it would have to come from Glashütte to say Glashütte on it, because they would not allow that under German trade law. If you weren't out of Glashütte, you couldn't say Glashütte on. Maybe if it was owned by a Glashütte company, but then you're starting to stretch. But all the watches that say Glashütte on them, like Nomos, it says Glashütte on it. Oh, there we go. It says Glashütte on it, because it's made in Glashütte. There we go. It's made in Glashütte. So is you can actually buy quartz out of Glashütte. Um, Bruno Bruno Sohnle, right? They make I have a review of some of their pieces in my archive. They make very well finished quartz movements. Everything out of Glashütte is done well, but everything that says Glashütte on it comes out of Glashütte, the town of Glashütte. Do people who live in Glashütte throw stones? That's a cute joke, Dr. Bob's Nightmare. Elusive Man, I'm wearing the Snoopy. Wearing the Snoopy, and I just bought the metal bracelet for it. I picked it up last week at the Frankfurt Omega Boutique. We're at the top of the hour, but I'm trying to scroll through all of these comments. I love it when we have a busy day. HRM, I don't think Nomos is short on cash. I agree. I think that's why they can afford to take it for a while, to not damage their market share. The book about Breguet, written by George Daniels, is incredible. He's a great watchmaker. Breguet is a great company. Showcases their influence. Kesslowitz, hey, if Glashütte is so good, why do they only give a 2-year warranty? Shouldn't they be offering 5 years since the workmanship is so good? Well, in that case, I would say it's more of a financial thing. 2 years is a decent period of time. 5 years, they're going to be taken in warranty. If a lot of these companies that give you 5-year warranties, they're expecting a certain percentage to come back. The big indicator of it is how well the watch is maintained. If you don't take good care of your watch, it's not going to last 5 years, even if it has a 5-year warranty. And so I think they're just being very German and saying, yeah, we can guarantee it 100% for 2 years. And after that, we'll fix it. But I don't think it's because of workmanship doubts or quality doubts. I think it's because they know they can guarantee it for 2 years, and they're just not willing to extend the warranty out longer they may, like, for example, if they say, for example, went to silicon parts, right? Like Omega has done, like Zenith has done, like Rolex has done now with the Land Dweller. They could probably increase it because you don't need lubrication the same way with a silicon part against a metal part when in the contact areas and such. But no, I think they're just being parsimonious is a nice way to say that they're watching their money. That's why they do the 2-year as well. And also, these are smaller shops. These are much smaller shops, so they don't have that kind of ability to take in that large a number of returns either as well. It keeps down the number of warranty repairs they have. I mean, if it breaks down in 2 years, then it really needed something. It might have had issues with the escapement or movement or whatever. 5 years damage, it could have just not been properly stored or not handled well. So like I said, I would say you could look at it from a lot of different ways, but I wouldn't hold it against them, me personally, because 2 years is still a healthy period of time. And usually by then you'll know if there's an issue with your watch anyway. Always buy a time grapher. Let's see. Hydro is 19. The GMT variant is 3. See, so there you go. And that's right. I have seen the GMT Hydro. I like that watch, and that's not a bad piece. It really isn't. Definitely worth the money, 100% worth the money. But the Tudor GMT costs almost twice as much. So yeah, like I said, you'd expect it to have a different fit and finish. HRM maintenance is a business. Most brands, and that's yeah, we were just talking. Patek and Rolex, your 5-year Glasuta original sucks. Okay. They don't stand behind their. I'm sorry, you must have had a bad experience with the Glasuta original. They make some really nice watches. Caesar, Julius Caesar. Hey, Geo's warranty is what's keeping me from buying a watch from them. Well, there are other Glasuta companies out there. You can look at some of them. Santa Claus, hey, you have a good week too. Yeah, I think I'm gonna check these last comments and close out the episode today because you know me, I like to end it to be, within an hour. Just leave people with stuff we could talk about next week. Langa is even worse. 2-year warranty, terrible service quality. I'm sorry you had 3 to 10 times as expensive, and sometimes movements are completely irreparable. I'm sorry you had a bad experience with them. Lange makes some fantastic pieces. I've seen, I've held quite a few in my own hands. I know people who own a Lange One. I know a guy who's owned his. He got it from his father. So yeah, I'm sorry you might have had a bad experience. I haven't seen anything like that, but I'm not going to discount your experience. I'm just sorry that you had a bad experience with them. Economies of scale. Oh yeah, let's see. Julius Caesar. It would be nice if Longines updated the Hydro Conquest like the GMT variant. Well, they do have a GMT variant. Maybe they could add some others. But then again, you can also get yourself the Conquest. This is a Longines Conquest moon phase calendar chrono. Or the Master Collection. They do have some nice pieces out there that you can buy. The Longines Master Collection is the chrono. That's a great one, like I said, and they get a column wheel in their Value 7753, 51, which I don't think anyone else gets. So Longines at least has got a revered place within the Swatch Group. Evil Mad, good evening. Unfortunately, good evening, but unfortunately I have to go soon. I got to get on it. I got to go to Nuremberg tomorrow. Economies of scale under the safety of the Swatch Group helped several brands stay alive. This is true. Like I said, the Swatch Group saved a lot of companies. Arthur, I'll take the Chinese replica factories forever, if ever, to fake that mechanism on the new land dweller. That new mechanism is an absolute work of art. Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons they put a display back on it. That is a beautiful movement. And they did it to both show off and distinguish themselves in the luxury world and to address things like that. It's gonna be almost impossible to fake that piece. The costs to fake it, you might as well make your own brand, in my humble opinion. John, love the Datejust and the Aquaterra. Couldn't do without both in my collection. Matching DJs with the Princess and a blue dial Aquaterra to match DC in the opening scenes of Spectre. There you go. Well, like I said, I love my Snoopy, and now that I have this, I don't think I need a. I used to have a Seamaster, and I don't think I've ever owned an Aquaterra. Although I would take one. That's for sure. Dr. Bob's Nightmare. Glashütte means glass house. I often wondered what they used to be in agricultural village. Well, actually, it means in the old language, like glass factory, like workshop, glass hütte. And actually, that's not too far from the original truth because the British and French watchmakers used to use the Swiss farmers to make watch parts over the winter when they were cooped up in their cottages, in their Häuser, the Hütten, the house, the home workshops. And so it comes right from that. And then Switzerland realized how much they were being used for parts manufacture, irony considering the current discussion, and they changed their laws and their tax laws and their import-export laws to make it more compatible for companies to work out of Switzerland. And Rolex used to be based in London themselves and moved to Switzerland because of that. But Glashütte comes from very honest sources. The home factory, the cottage factory. There really were cottage factories in the original watch days in Switzerland. All the Swiss farmers over the winter. And then one would make one wheel, 50, 60 wheels. One would make the other wheel. One would make hands. And the watchmaker would come through, pick up all the parts, take them home, and finish them. So let's see. Aditya, safe to say now a video from me on German watchmaking and some history for flavor would be loved and appreciated. I will. I'll do an episode on German watchmaking. I will. Glad that the chat is interactive. I love it myself. Julius Caesar, own a Datejust, but love some of the Aquaterra dial colors. Definitely consider an Aquaterra. Gian, Aditya, Alex was able to feature this. I did feature this in Factory. I'm not happy with the sound, but I'll have to reshoot when I have some time. But the sound was good enough to be legible, so I ran it because there was a lot of good information in there. Where they talked about the tegumentation and they talked about the oil filling and all of that stuff. It's a good video. The Zen Factory visit. Hanhart's great. Austin, how's it going? Hanhart's great, and I've reviewed some of their pieces. They really make it. Steve McQueen used to own a Hanhart. They're way underappreciated, and they punch above their weight. They're good watches. Evil Mad, like with cars and motorcycles, not the warranty, but the service intervals. Hate my Zenith has to go 2 years into service. I would say get a time grapher and keep an eye on your amplitude and your beat rate and stuff like that. And if it starts to stray, that's when you take it in. That way you don't take it in too early and you don't take it in too late. In my humble opinion, I'm not a watchmaker, and I'm not telling you to do it. I would just say that's what I do. And it may only stretch your service interval by 6 months or so, or a year, but then that's a year you can save before you have to pay for the service. Retro 70s TV case. Glasso de Original is great looking. It's a nice one, Dr. Bob. Julius Caesar, that's a lovely watch. I was referring to the design, Julius Caesar, referring to the design of the current Hydro Conquest, removing the Arabic numerals, updating the case construction, etc., like the GMT. Oh, that's a good idea. I love the other collections with Longines too. I do too. Aditya, I will check out Gian. Thanks for the suggestion. Okay, so we ran a little long today, but we had a really good conversation. I love it when we're rolling hot and we get a lot of interesting people and a lot of interesting questions. And it was an interesting topic. And what we'll do is I'll talk about a variation on it downstream. But I think next episode maybe we'll talk about, like I said, traveling with watches, which was going to be my subject last week. Searching watches now, T-Sir Powermatic PX or Bull of a Marine Star. Well, hey, JV, I'll tell you what. In the case of the Powermatic versus the Bull of a Marine Star, I would go with the Marine Star, but the Marine Star is a diver and the Powermatic 80 is a daily wear. So it depends on what you're doing. Let's do a typography discussion. Take care, everybody. Live long and prosper, and have a fantastic week, and especially have a great evening. And I like Nomos too. Last words I'll point out. I just like my Nomos. Da-da-da, Nomos. I love my Nomos. And I'm glad you all appreciate the advice. But hey, take care. Love you all. Have a fantastic evening.